In this clip, we are going to be discussing the endocrine system, and this is part two of a two-part series. In the previous video, we have discussed the hypothalamus and its relationship to the pituitary, and we also listed the hormones that each of those glands releases. So in this clip, we're going to be discussing the rest of the organs. To begin, we also have another endocrine gland located in the brain, in addition to the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and that is the pineal gland. So let's go ahead and talk about this one. So the pineal gland is going to release the hormone melatonin. And so melatonin is really important because it regulates the sleep and wake cycle. And this is what we call the circadian rhythm. Next up, we're going to go inferior, and the first gland, endocrine gland that we will hit is going to be the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland also has parathyroid gland, located in very close proximity to it. And so let's discuss those two. So the thyroid gland is a very important endocrine gland, and it's going to release thyroid hormone that we collectively call T3 and T4. And so these are important for the growth and maturation of tissues. They increase metabolic rate, body heat production, and oxygen consumption. So I'm going to abbreviate that by saying growth, maturation of tissues, and increased metabolic rate. Now, the thyroid gland is also going to release another hormone that we call calcitonin. And so this is very important because it's involved in maintaining calcium homeostasis in the body. And so calcitonin is going to lower serum calcium levels. So when your body detects high calcium levels, calcitonin is released to drop those levels. As for the parathyroid gland, this is going to release a parathyroid hormone, so PTH. And PTH actually opposes calcitonin, so it's going to raise serum calcium levels. So again, when the body detects low calcium levels, PTH is released in order to increase them. Next up, we have the thymus. The thymus is considered an endocrine gland, but it also is part of the lymphatic system. And so it releases hormone thymosin. Okay? And so thymosin is important for the maturation of the white blood cells. And so you know that the white blood cells are also involved in the lymphatic system and in the immune system protection. Hence, the thymus is an organ that belongs to the endocrine as well as the lymphatic or immune systems. Okay, so white blood cells, specifically T cells. Okay, now if we make our way down the human body, what you'll see are the kidneys, and the kidneys have yet another endocrine gland sitting on the superior side, and these are the adrenal glands. So let's talk about those. So the adrenal glands have two zones, two regions, the cortex, which is the outer shell, and the medulla, which is the inner shell, inner region. Okay, and so the inner region, the medulla, is going to release the sympathetic nervous system hormone or neurotransmitter, norepinephrine, that's involved in the fight or flight response. As for the cortex, it's going to release a wide variety of hormones, some of which are aldosterone, which is important for sodium and water retention in the body, or reabsorption. It's also involved in releasing glucocorticoids. And so these glucocorticoids are important because they are important in metabolic functions. They also have some anti-inflammatory effects, and also some growth suppressing effects. And another hormone that the adrenal cortex is going to release is androgens. Okay. All right. Next up, let's look at the pancreas. So the pancreas is actually considered an exocrine and an endocrine gland. An endocrine gland because it releases hormones, and an exocrine gland because it's involved in digestion, so it produces digestive enzymes that are released into the small intestine in order to help with digestion. But so today we're going to look at its endocrine function, and for that we have two types of cells that are going to release the two hormones we're going to be discussing. We have alpha cells and beta cells. Alpha cells release the hormone glucagon. Beta cells release the hormone insulin, which you have probably heard of. So insulin is important because it's released after a meal to lower blood glucose levels, and glucagon, does the opposite. So it's going to be released in order to increase blood glucose levels. So increases blood glucose, for example, by stimulating the breakdown of glycogen into glucose. This is a process that we call glycogenolysis. So lysis is breakdown, glycogen is the storage form of glucose. And so glucagon would stimulate that in order to increase glucose levels. And insulin is going to be involved in lowering blood glucose. Okay, and then finally, this brings us to the gonads. So gonads are going to be ovaries in females and the testes in males. So ovaries are going to release two hormones. They release estrogen and they release progesterone. As for the testes, they release testosterone. Right? So estrogen and testosterone are important because they are going to stimulate the development of secondary sex characteristics and the development of their reproductive organs. Okay, so the development of sex characteristics and the reproductive organs. And that's going to be estrogen and testosterone. And then as for progesterone, this is important because it's going to ensure that the endometrial lining of the uterus is thick. And so that's the inner layer of the uterine wall. And progesterone is going to stimulate the thickening of this wall in order to prepare for pregnancy and implantation of the embryo. So thickening of uterine endometrial layer. For implantation and pregnancy.